Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we are going to be taking a look at the world of maritime regulations.
That's right.
And specifically, we're going to be focusing on those fascinating bylaws
Yeah.
and the intricate pilot grading systems.
Buckle up.
Yes, buckle up because we've got some really interesting stuff to uncover. You know what's amazing to me? Some ports have bylaws that are practically ancient.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like echoes from the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And then the way pilots are graded, it's like a ranking system, straight out of like a martial arts movie.
Yeah, it's a fascinating world, a lot more dynamic than people might think.
Yeah. To help us navigate this complex world, we have an expert with us who can, really help us connect the dots here. Explain not just what these rules are, but why they really matter.
Absolutely, and I think, the history and the strategy and that push and pull between safety and efficiency that goes on in this world is really quite something.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump right in. Let's start with something that really caught my eye when I was doing research for this.
Okay.
Pilotage exemption certificates, or PECs as they're called.
Tex, yeah.
It's like getting a master's degree in ship handling.
Right.
It allows certain captains to pilot their own vessels in specific ports.
Yeah.
But getting a PEC is no walk in the park, right?
No, you're absolutely right. It's a hard-earned privilege, not a right. And it really signifies a level of expertise that goes above and beyond even the usual captain's license.
So what does that process even look like for a captain to get a PEC?
Well, it involves rigorous study. There are local knowledge exams that would make your head spin,
Wow.
and then practical evaluations that are conducted by the most senior pilots.
Really?
It's like the ultimate test of a captain's ship handling skills.
Wow. I was looking at the requirements for the Port of London.
Right.
Talk about intense. I mean, PEC holders there need to know everything from the names of specific buoys
Wow.
to how shallow water affects their ship's maneuverability.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Makes you really realize the level of responsibility involved here.
Absolutely. And remember, this is just one port.
Wow.
Every port has its own set of unique challenges, requirements reflecting local conditions and traffic patterns and potential hazards.
Right.
The Port of London, with its long history and those intricate waterways, demands an exceptional level of local knowledge.
So it's not just about knowing how to steer a ship, it's about understanding the personality of the port itself.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about safety either. I mean, for companies, there's a real economic incentive here. They can save a lot of money by not having to hire dedicated pilots.
Oh, yeah.
But what are your thoughts on the downsides of that? Could this create, unfair competition or put pressure on the traditional pilot profession?
That's a good point. It seems like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have these highly experienced captains
Right.
who know their vessels inside and out,
Yes.
potentially leading to safer, more efficient operations. But on the other hand, you have the concerns about the impact on the pilotage profession as a whole.
Yeah.
And are people going to start cutting corners to save costs?
Yeah. Are there unintended consequences?
Yeah. Do we have anything in our sources that, talk about how these concerns are being addressed?
Well, the EU study on PECs that we have actually dives into this very issue, and there seems to be a growing debate about striking the right balance.
Okay.
So some argue that PECs should be more widely available to really encourage competition, reward experienced captains. Others believe that the role of that dedicated pilot is just too crucial to be compromised,
Right.
especially in these complex and high-traffic ports.
It's a fascinating debate, and it highlights how the maritime industry is constantly evolving.
Always changing.
Yeah. And speaking of evolving, let's move on to pilot grading.
Okay.
Another area that's a lot more complex than it might seem at first glance.
Mm-hmm.
I love the analogy to martial arts.
Right.
You start as like a white belt, and you work your way up through the ranks, mastering new skills and tackling bigger challenges.
Yeah.
How does this play out in the world of ports and pilots?
Well, imagine a small port with just a handful of pilots. They might all be at the same level because the traffic is relatively simple. The types of vessels they handle are fairly standard.
Right.
But as ports get larger and busier, the need for a more nuanced grading system becomes really apparent.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want a rookie pilot trying to maneuver a massive container ship through a narrow channel.
Exactly. That's where the grading system comes in. It's all about matching the pilot's experience and expertise to the specific challenges of each vessel and the particular conditions of the port.
So in a megaport like Rotterdam, for example, you'd have a whole hierarchy of pilots, each qualified to handle different sizes and types of ships.
Precisely. You might have entry-level pilots handling smaller vessels like coastal freighters or ferries.
Okay.
As they gain experience, they can move up to handling larger tankers or bulk carriers. And then at the very top, you have the elite pilots who can guide those massive container ships and cruise liners with pinpoint precision. It's a career path that demands years of dedication, continuous learning, and a cool head under pressure.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Port of Cork bylaws, and they actually specify the length overall, or LOA limits, for each pilot class. They even outline the training requirements for upgrading to the next level.
Wow.
It's incredibly detailed.
It has to be. Remember, these pilots are responsible for the safe passage of incredibly valuable cargo, and in many cases, hundreds or even thousands of passengers.
Right.
The stakes are high, the margin for error is slim, and it's not just about knowing the rules of the road, it's about mastering the art of ship handling in a dynamic and often unpredictable environment.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how this system has evolved over time.
Yep.
Our source material mentions how pilots on the Manchester Ship Canal used to start as helmsmen learning by actually steering the ship under the watchful eye of experienced pilots,
Right.
like an apprenticeship.
It's an incredible apprenticeship. It's almost a lost art these days.
Right.
Yeah.
And while simulator training has become increasingly sophisticated, there's still no substitute for that hands-on experience for learning the nuances of ship handling from a seasoned master.
Really not. And I think it speaks to the importance of mentorship in this profession.
Oh, yeah.
The passing down of knowledge and skills from one generation of pilots to the next.
It makes you wonder what kind of person thrives in this profession. You know, what are the personality traits that set these elite pilots apart?
It's a unique breed.
Yeah.
From what I've gathered, the best pilots are those who combine exceptional technical skills with a deep understanding of human factors as well.
Interesting.
They need to be able to anticipate problems, make split-second decisions, and communicate effectively with the bridge crew, VTS operators, even other vessels in the vicinity.
Right.
They're not just steering a ship, they're orchestrating a complex ballet of movement in a constantly changing environment.
Yeah. It's a demanding but incredibly rewarding profession, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
The sense of responsibility, the mastery of skill, the sheer scale of the vessels they handle.
It's amazing.
It must be incredible.
Yeah. It's a career path that draws people who are passionate about the sea, who thrive on challenge, and who find satisfaction in knowing that their expertise is contributing to the safe and efficient movement of goods and people around the world. It's a vital role, often overlooked, but really essential to the global economy and our interconnected world.
Well said. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that underpins all of this. The fascinating world of bylaws.
Okay.
It's easy to think of them as just a bunch of rules, but they're actually a lot more than that, aren't they?
They are, you're right. Bylaws are more than just a rule book. They're a reflection of a port's history, its priorities, its unique challenges. They're a living document, constantly evolving to address new technologies, environmental concerns, and the ever-increasing complexity of maritime traffic.
Yeah. I was amazed to learn that some bylaws have roots dating back to the 1800s.
It's amazing.
It's incredible how legislation from centuries ago, like the Harbors, Dock, and Piers Clauses Act of 1847, still influences how modern ports operate.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is how those early bylaws laid the groundwork for the complex systems we have today. They address fundamental issues like safety of navigation, preventing collisions, and managing cargo handling in a way that's still relevant today.
And it's not just about preventing accidents, right?
No.
Bylaws cover a wide range of issues,
Great range.
from environmental protection and waste management to noise pollution and even the handling of dangerous goods.
Exactly. They're about maintaining order, protecting the environment, and ensuring the smooth flow of commerce in a dynamic and often challenging environment. They're a testament to the interconnectedness of the maritime world and the need for a comprehensive framework to manage the myriad activities that take place within a port.
And let's not forget, these bylaws aren't just suggestions. They have the force of law behind them.
That's right.
Violating them can lead to serious consequences.
Absolutely. We're talking about potential fines, detentions, and even legal action in some cases. It really underscores the importance of compliance and the shared responsibility of everyone operating within that port environment. to understand and adhere to these regulations.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the world of PECs, delved into the intricacies of pilot grading, and started to unravel the fascinating tapestry of bylaws. But we're just scratching the surface right now.
Oh, absolutely. We've got a lot more to unpack.
So stay tuned, because in the next part of our deep dive, we'll be exploring some specific examples of bylaws in action.
Real-world examples.
Yes, and we'll delve even deeper into the challenges and rewards of the pilot profession.
Fascinating stuff.
It's going to be a fascinating ride, so don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. I'm really eager to kind of dive into some real-world examples of how bylaws actually shape the daily life of a port.
Okay.
So let's talk about tidal windows. You might think a ship can just sail into port whenever it pleases.
Right.
But in reality, many ports have very strict limitations based on the water depth and the tidal flows.
So it's like nature sets its own timetable.
Exact.
No cutting in line, even if
Yeah.
you're captaining a giant cargo ship. I'm trying to picture, like, what goes through a captain's mind when they miss their tidal window. What are the real-world consequences there?
Oh, it's definitely a high-stakes game of timing.
Yeah.
Think about those massive VLCC oil tankers. Fully laden, they need a lot of water under their keel.
Right.
Some ports only allow these mega ships to enter during very specific windows, often just a few hours around high tide.
Oh, wow.
Miss that window, and you could be facing hours or even days of delay.
That's got to be frustrating for the captain, the crew, and the company. I bet those delays translate into some serious costs.
Oh, absolutely. Time is money in the shipping world. And every hour of delay can impact schedules, delivery deadlines, and ultimately the bottom line. And it's not just about size either. Some ports have very narrow channels or tricky currents that require really pinpoint timing and expert navigation.
I remember reading about a port in Australia where the entrance channel is so shallow that ships can only enter or leave during a very specific window each day.
Wow.
Talk about pressure.
Yeah, it's like threading a needle with a supertanker.
Yeah, and let's not forget the impact of neap tides.
Right.
When the tidal range is smaller, those tidal windows get even tighter.
Yeah, even more precise calculations and skillful maneuvering.
Right.
One wrong move could mean running aground, which is every captain's worst nightmare.
Absolutely. And, it's not just about tides and currents, right?
No.
There's a whole ecosystem of other water users out there.
Right.
Ferries, fishing boats, pleasure craft.
Yeah.
It must be like a maritime obstacle course, especially in really busy waterways.
You hit the nail on the head. Think about, those beautiful ports along the Mediterranean coast bustling with tourist activity. Imagine trying to pilot a massive cruise ship with dozens of tiny sailboats weaving around you.
Talk about a stress test. I can only imagine the level of concentration and situational awareness required.
Oh, yeah.
And I bet those jet skis and windsurfers add an extra layer of complexity. Zipping around like water bugs.
They certainly do. They're fast, agile, and sometimes unpredictable,
Right.
which makes them particularly challenging for pilots who are trying to maneuver these large vessels with limited turning circles. It really requires a constant awareness of your surroundings, an understanding of how different vessels behave, and the ability to anticipate potential hazards.
It's a good reminder that safety isn't just about following the rules, it's about being constantly vigilant and aware of everything happening around you.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, we'd be remiss not to talk about the vital role of vessel traffic services, or VTS.
Yeah.
They're like the air traffic controllers of the sea, right?
That's a good analogy. But there are some key differences. So while air traffic controllers have direct control over aircraft, VTS operators actually act more as advisors and coordinators.
Okay.
So they're monitoring vessel movements, providing crucial information to pilots and captains, and coordinating traffic flow to prevent accidents and delays.
Right.
They don't have the authority to issue direct orders,
Okay.
but their guidance is absolutely essential for safe navigation, particularly in busy waterways.
It's amazing to think about how things were done before VTS. I read that pilots used to rely on Morse code signals and radio telegrams to communicate. Can you imagine trying to coordinate ship movements with such limited technology?
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? The advent of radar, VHF radio, and now AIS has really revolutionized maritime communication,
Really?
allowing for real-time situational awareness and a rapid response to emergencies. So VTS operators can now track vessels with incredible precision, monitor weather conditions, and communicate vital information to pilots and captains in a matter of seconds.
And VTS doesn't just deal with routine traffic flow, right?
No.
They're also the first responders in case of emergencies,
Absolutely.
like collisions or groundings or oil spills.
That's right. They play a crucial role in coordinating those emergency response efforts, ensuring that the right resources are deployed quickly and effectively so they can alert rescue services, they can direct other vessels away from the danger zone, and provide really vital information to the authorities that are responding to the incident.
It's incredible to think about the sheer volume of activity that VTS operators manage on a daily basis.
It is.
They're truly the unsung heroes of maritime safety. It makes you wonder how bylaws address the potential environmental impacts of all of this maritime traffic.
Yeah, that's a crucial aspect of modern bylaws. Sustainability is no longer an afterthought, it's a central concern. And bylaws play a vital role in regulating things like pollution, waste disposal, and protecting sensitive marine environments.
I remember reading about the devastating impact of ships dumping their waste at sea,
Oh yeah,
for years and years.
for a long time.
And thankfully, things have changed dramatically. The Waste Management Act of 1997 and SOLAs now require ports worldwide to provide waste reception facilities for all types of ships' waste.
It's a huge step forward, but the challenge of enforcing those regulations remains.
Uh.
Not all ports have adequate facilities, and some ship operators may still be tempted to cut corners to save time and money. It's an ongoing battle to ensure compliance and protect our oceans from pollution.
And then there's the ever-present risk of oil spills.
Right.
The Merchant Shipping Act of 1995 gives authorities the power to impose hefty fines for accidental or willful discharge of oil. But even with those deterrents in place, accidents still happen.
They do. The Sea Empress oil tanker grounding in Milford Haven back in 1996 is a stark reminder of the potential consequences of a major spill. Over 20 different organizations were involved in that response, from salvage companies to environmental protection agencies. It was a logistical nightmare, but they managed to contain the spill and minimize the long-term damage. And I think it highlights the importance of robust emergency response plans and the ability to coordinate effectively across multiple organizations.
It's a reminder that even with the best regulations and technology in place, the human element is still crucial.
Absolutely.
It's about having skilled pilots, vigilant VTS operators, and a shared commitment to safety and environmental responsibility across the entire maritime community.
Couldn't agree more. Bylaws provide the framework, but it's the people who bring them to life.
Right.
And speaking of the people who enforce these regulations, let's shift our focus a bit to the authorities that are responsible for creating and enforcing these rules. We've talked about bylaws a lot, but who exactly has the power to make them?
Yeah, it seems like there's a whole web of organizations involved,
It is.
Harbor authorities, pilot authorities, even government agencies like the Department for Transport.
Right.
It can be a bit confusing to understand who's in charge of what.
It is a complex system, but there's a logic to it.
Okay.
Essentially, we have different levels of authority, each with their own specific responsibilities.
Okay, so break it down for us.
Yeah.
Who are the key players in this regulatory game?
So at the local level, we have competent harbor authorities,
Okay.
or CHAs as they're often called.
Okay.
They're responsible for the day-to-day management of their ports, including safety of navigation, traffic management, and environmental protection.
So they're the ones making sure everything runs smoothly within their jurisdiction.
Exactly. And they have the power to create bylaws that are tailored to the specific needs and challenges of their ports.
But it's not a free-for-all, right?
Yeah.
They can't just make up any rules they want.
Absolutely not. Their bylaw-making powers are granted by acts of parliament, and they have to follow a strict process of consultation and approval. There are checks and balances in place to ensure that bylaws are fair, reasonable, and consistent with national and international regulations.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want every port having completely different rules.
No.
It would be utter chaos for, ship masters and pilots trying to navigate from one port to another.
Precisely. But within that framework, CHAs do have a lot of flexibility to address local issues.
Okay.
For instance, the Port of Southampton has a very detailed set of bylaws covering everything from speed limits and vessel movement restrictions to rules for handling dangerous goods and even regulations for road and rail traffic on the dock estate.
Wow, that sounds comprehensive.
It is, and it really reflects the sheer complexity of managing a modern port.
Yeah.
It's not just about ships and water. It's a bustling ecosystem of activity with interconnected systems for transportation, logistics, cargo handling, and security.
And then we have pilotage authorities, right?
Yeah.
What's their role in this intricate dance of regulations?
So, pilotage authorities are responsible for ensuring the provision of pilotage services within their areas. They set the standards, license pilots, oversee their training, and make sure there are enough qualified pilots available to handle the traffic. They're also responsible for making bylaws related to pilotage, including things like pilot qualifications, training requirements, and even the fees charged for pilotage services.
It sounds like a pretty important job, especially considering the specialized skills and knowledge required to be a marine pilot.
It is. They're essentially guardians of safety when it comes to navigation in and out of ports. They play a crucial role in ensuring the smooth flow of traffic and preventing accidents.
But what about the big picture? Where does a government agency like the UK's Department for Transport fit into all of this?
So the Department for Transport has overall responsibility for maritime safety and security in the UK.
Okay.
They set the national policy framework, they oversee the work of CHAs and pilotage authorities, and they have the power to intervene in cases of non-compliance or serious safety concerns.
So they're kind of like the ultimate authority, the final arbiter of maritime regulations.
That's right. They have the power to make national regulations, approve bylaws, and even issue things like harbor closure orders or pilotage function removal orders in extreme cases.
Whoa, those sound serious. When would they ever resort to such drastic measures?
Well, a harbor closure order would only be used in a major emergency like a severe storm, a security threat, or a major pollution incident.
Oh, wow.
It's basically a way to shut down all activity in a port to protect lives and property.
And a pilotage function removal order.
Yeah.
That sounds even more dramatic.
It is a last resort, only used in very extreme circumstances where there's a serious concern about the competence or safety of the pilotage service in a particular port. It essentially allows the Department for Transport to take control of pilotage operations until the issues are resolved.
It's fascinating how this multi-layered system has evolved over centuries to address the unique challenges of the maritime world. It's a testament to the importance of maritime safety and the need for clear lines of authority and responsibility, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And while it may seem bureaucratic at times, it's ultimately there to protect lives, property, and the environment.
Right.
It's a complex dance of regulations, expertise, and collaboration, but when it works well, it's a symphony of efficiency and safety. And that brings us to a crucial question for our listeners to ponder.
We've spent this deep dive exploring this really intricate world,
Yeah.
of bylaws and pilot grading,
It's a fascinating world.
uncovering the history, the rationale, the practical implications of all these maritime regulations. It's been an eye-opening journey for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, me too. It's amazing to see how these systems have evolved over time.
Yeah.
Adapting to new technologies, changing trade patterns, the ever-growing size of ships.
And it's not just about the technical aspects, is it? We've also touched on the human element here.
Absolutely.
The skill, the dedication, the cool-headedness of the people who keep our ports running smoothly.
Yeah, from those seasoned pilots navigating these massive vessels through crowded waterways, to the VTS operators who are coordinating traffic flow and responding to emergencies, there's a remarkable level of expertise and collaboration at play.
And it's clear that bylaws aren't just about enforcing rules.
No.
They're about fostering a culture of safety, protecting the environment, and ensuring the long-term sustainability of the maritime industry as a whole.
Exactly. They provide that framework for responsible operations, striking a balance between economic interests and the need to protect our oceans and coastal communities.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
Given the increasing size of ships, the growing complexity of global trade, and this urgent need to address climate change, how do you think these systems, pilotage, bylaws, port management, how do you think they'll need to evolve in the future?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What new technologies and regulations and collaborations will be needed to ensure the safe, sustainable, and efficient operation of our ports in the decades to come?
It's a challenge that will require, ingenuity and foresight and a willingness to embrace new ways of thinking.
Absolutely.
But as we've seen throughout this deep dive, the maritime world has a long and impressive history of rising to meet new challenges.
Indeed. From the earliest days of sail to the age of mega ships and autonomous vessels, the industry has constantly adapted and innovated.
Right.
And as we sail into the future, we can be confident that the lessons learned from the past will guide us towards a safer, more sustainable, and even more fascinating maritime world.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of bylaws and pilot grading. We hope you enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, fair winds and following seas.